was a pity she didn't, because that at any rate would have hidden some of her fearful ugliness. Take a look at her. Have you ever seen a woman with an uglier face than that? I doubt it. But the funny thing is that Mrs. Twit wasn't born ugly. She had quite a nice face when she was young. The ugliness had grown upon her year by year as she got older. Why would that happen? I'll tell you why. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a double chin and stick out teeth, but if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. Nothing shone out of Mrs. Twit's face. In her right hand she carried a walking stick. She used to tell people that this was because she had warts growing on the sole of her left foot and walking was painful, but the real reason she carried a stick was so that she could hit things with it, things like dogs and cats and small children. And then there was the glass eye. Mrs. Twit had a glass eye that was always looking the other way. The glass eye. You can play a lot of tricks with a glass eye because you can take it out and pop it back in again at any time you like. You can bet your life Mrs. Twit knew all the tricks. One morning she took out her glass eye and dropped it into Mr. Twit's mug of beer when he wasn't looking. Mr. Twit sat there drinking the beer slowly. The froth made a white ring on the hairs around his mouth. He wiped the white froth on his sleeves and wiped his sleeve on his trousers. You're plotting something, Mrs. Twit said, giving her back turn so he wouldn't see that she had taken out her glass eye. Whenever you go all quiet like that, I know very well you're plotting something. Mrs. Twit was right. Mr. Twit was plotting away like mad. He was trying to think of a really nasty trick he could play on his wife that day. You'd better be careful, Mrs. Twit said, because when I see you starting to plot, I watch you like a wombat. Oh, do shut up, you old hag, Mr. Twit said. He went on drinking his beer, and his evil mind kept working away on the latest horrid trick he was going to play on the old woman. Suddenly, as Mr. Twit dipped the last drop of beer down his throat, he caught a sight of Mrs. Twit's awful glass eyes staring up at him from the bottom of the mug. It made him jump. I told you I was watching you, cackled Mrs. Twit. I've got eyes everywhere, so you'd better be careful. The frog. To pay her back for the glass eye in his beer, Mr. Twit decided he would put a frog in Mrs. Twit's bed. He caught a big one down by the pond and carried it back secretly in a box. That night, when Mrs. Twit was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, Mr. Twit slipped the frog between her sheets. Then he got into his own bed and waited for the fun to begin. Mrs. Twit came back and climbed into her bed and put out the light. She lay there in the dark, scratching her tummy. Dirty old hags like her always itch their tummies. Then all at once she felt something cold and slimy crawling over her feet. She screamed. "What's the matter with you?" Mr. Twit said. "Help!" screamed Mrs. Twit, bouncing about. "There's something in my bed. I'll bet it's that giant skillywigger I saw on the floor just now," Mr. Twit said. "That what?" screamed Mrs. Twit. "I tried to kill it, but it got away," Mr. Twit said. "It got teeth like screwdrivers." "Help!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "Save me! It's all over my feet." "It'll bite off your toes," said Mr. Twit. Mrs. Twit fainted. Mr. Twit got out of bed and fetched a jug of cold water. He poured the water over Mrs. Twit's head to revive her. The frog crawled up from under the sheets to get near the water. It started jumping about on the pillow. Frogs love water. This one was having a good time. squishy. I find it very tasty, Mrs. Twits said. She was watching him from the other end of the table. It gave her great pleasure to watch him eating worms. I find it rather bitter, Mr. Twits said. It's got a distinctly bitter flavour. Buy the other kind next time. Mrs. Twit waited until Mr. Twit had eaten up the whole plateful. Then she said, "You want to know why your spaghetti was squishy?" Mr. Twit wiped the tomato sauce from his beard with a corner of the tablecloth. "Why?" he said. "And why it had a nasty bitter taste?" "Why?" he said. "Because it was worms," cried Mrs. Twit, clapping her hands and stamping her feet on the floor and rocking with horrible laughter. The funny walking stick. To pay Mrs. Twit back for the worms in his spaghetti, Mr. Twit thought up a really clever, nasty trick. One night, when the old woman was asleep, he crept out of bed and took her walking stick downstairs to his work shed. There he stuck a tiny round piece of wood, no thicker than a penny, on the bottom of the stick. This made the stick longer, but the difference was so small. The next morning, Mrs. Twit didn't notice it. The following night, Mr. Twit stuck on another tiny bit of wood. Every night, he crept downstairs and added an extra tiny thickness of wood to the end of the walking stick. He did it very neatly so the extra bits looked like a part of the old stick. Gradually, but oh so gradually, Mrs. Twit's walking stick was getting longer and longer. Now when something is growing very slowly,